Why did farmers sign on to Monsanto to grow genetic altered canola in 1996 when regulatory approval was given, and right across the border to us in the U.S., soybean farmers, Monsanto was allowed to sell to them genetic altered soybeans? And I think the reasons were this. Number one, Monsanto told farmers that it would be more nutritious, it would be a bigger yielder, but most of all, less chemicals. And in Western Canada, the same as right across the border, we as farmers use hundreds and hundreds of tons of chemicals, insecticides, pesticides, herbicides, you name it. Our land is contaminated, our water is contaminated, and farmers now realize that we're just killing ourselves and we're killing the environment, our insects, our birds, and everything else. And when farmers heard that, it was not only an economic reason, it was the fact that they realized, farmers realized themselves, like myself, the damage we were doing to the environment. And so when Monsanto said less chemicals, I think that's what really caught the farmer's ear. But what happened after 4 and 5 years? Number one, it was not more nutritious, it was not a bigger yielder, and when Monsanto advertised a bigger yielder, always note, they never say anything about quality. The quality drops about in half. And the third issue, less chemicals. Farmers are now using from 6 to 10 times more chemicals. There's 3 things to the whole issue of GMOs. Basically, one is the part I'm really involved with, property rights versus patent law. The rights of farmers always to be able to use their own seed worldwide. The other issue is the health and safety of GM foods. And the third issue, the damage to the environment.
In Bismarck, North Dakota, at our state capital, this past spring, a legislator asked a Monsanto representative, at what level of contamination in a farmer's field do you consider a patent infringement has occurred? We were told that if a farmer represents a field of soybeans to be non-GMO, and Monsanto finds as little as 1 plant that tests positive in that field, that they may consider that patent infringement, irregardless of whether the farmer used conventional chemicals on the crop. I can also assure you that it is not possible for a farmer in the United States to buy soybean seed from a major seed supplier that is not already contaminated with Monsanto's genetically modified organism.
There is no such thing as pure canola seed. It is all contaminated. There is no such thing also as containment. And the reason for that is because now canola has become a super wheat. What is a super wheat? If farmer A buys a canola, a GMO canola from this company, and farmer B buys canola, GMO from this company, and over here a farmer buys GMO canola from Monsanto, the genes now from these 3 GMO crops are now into one conventional plant, which makes it now a super weed because now you need 3 chemicals to kill 1 plant. And that super weed now in 4 and 5 years has spread all over Western Canada into fields where people never ever grew canola. Wheat fields, barley fields, oats fields, flax fields, it's all over. Monsanto says, don't worry, no problem, we'll now come out with a new super chemical. But I guarantee you by the end of the year 2001, after tests are done, we will have 5 of the GMO genes in 1 plant.
On the aspect of the safety of these products, we're growing crops out here that if any bugs or worms chew on them, the crops have a built-in pesticide that was genetically engineered to kill worms and bugs that chew on the crops. It's in the total plant, including the kernels that we eat. Well, if our DNA is the same as these little creatures that chew on them and it kills them, I don't know about you people, but it quite frankly scares the hell out of me to be eating these crops.
There is not one published, peer-reviewed report in the world stating that GM foods are safe.
As a farmer, when I first heard about these things coming on the market, I thought it would make things easy for us, easier, and I I assumed everything would be safe. But what I've learned is that just because our government approves it and companies introduce it, it isn't necessarily going to be safe. We look in the past, we were told that PCBs were safe. DDT, we were told that was safe. There's old commercials that the government put on showing children eating at a picnic table while a fog was rolling over them of DDT. And because our chemical companies that produce these assured our government and the people that these things were safe. And the list goes on and on of products like this. And that we've now learned years down the road that they were very dangerous and probably are the reasons why our country has the highest cancer rate of any nation in the world. Now we're being told that these genetically modified crops are safe. I don't believe it.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, a division of the Canadian Department of Agriculture and Ag Canada, had been receiving grants from Monsanto to do research work on agricultural test sites and development sites in Western Canada. These same people, after taking grants from Monsanto, it came out that they were the ones that gave regulatory approval to Monsanto so they could sell GMO canola to farmers. So you had, on one hand, they were taking grants, on the other hand, they were given regulatory approval. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which was regarded as one of the most reliable and trustworthy departments in Canada in regards to the safety of foods, admitted at my trial that they had done no testing on genetic altered food. They only used Monsanto's data.
Monsanto's response is, Monsanto should not have to vouchsafe the safety of biotech food. Our interest is in selling as much of it as possible. Assuring its safety is the FDA's job. That's from Phil Angel, a Monsanto spokesman.
So there you have our government agencies basically in bed, taking grants from Monsanto and then given regulatory approval. And I'm sure the same thing has happened in the United States.
I have written a letter to our Attorney General, John Ashcroft, and I begged him for help with this monumental crisis that farmers are facing and we're facing. His response was that it is not their policy to get involved in private litigation matters. I have since learned that Mr. John Ashcroft has submitted a brief to the U.S. Supreme Court regarding a similar patent infringement case to be heard in October of this year. He preyed upon the Supreme Court to uphold these new plant patents to protect the corporations that own the patents. Upon learning this, I also learned that Mr. Ashcroft had received the largest campaign contribution that Monsanto gave any 2000 political candidate in his failed bid for Senate re-election. This knowledge felt like a cold slap in the face. It makes a person wonder if all of government is for sale to the highest bidder.
I've been asked many times, am I totally against GMOs? It's a difficult question to answer. I think all of us want to be on the leading edge of new technology. But GMOs, I say, at what price? If something is released into the environment, a life-giving form that destroys the property of others, I say then it is wrong. If it's not safe to eat, if it's not safe for our environment, then I say it's wrong. And then we should adopt a precautionary method or principle and go slow. That's what we have to do with that whole issue, the whole issue of GMOs. But until that time arrives, I say no to GMOs.
We got a saying here in Texas, Percy. We say that if you find that you've dug yourself into a hole, the very first thing to do is quit digging. However, the ag establishment, the corporations and their puppets in government, continue to say we got to dig ever deeper. If 8 billion pounds of pesticides every year is not doing enough damage to our food, our environment, ourselves, then let's add genetic engineering to this Kafkaesque stew. Let's tamper with the very DNA of our food, transgenic mutations. And then they say, here's an idea. Let's also fool our customers by disallowing labeling.
Famous molecular biologist John Fagan said, without labeling of GMO products, it will be very difficult for scientists to trace the source of new illness caused by genetically engineered food. Dr. Erwin Chargaff is an eminent biochemist. He's often referred to as the father of molecular biology. And he said that genetic engineering, he considers it a molecular Auschwitz, and warned that the technology of genetic engineering poses a greater threat to the world than the advent of nuclear technology. An irreversible attack on the biosphere is something so unheard of, so unthinkable to previous generations, that I only wish that mine had not been guilty of it.
The issue is the most fundamental issue of democracy. And it asks this question, the same question that democracy-seeking people have always had to ask. Who the hell is going to be in charge? A handful of corporate greed heads? Or we the people? That's what it comes down to. Who's going to be making the decisions in a society that supposedly is self-governing? Mary Helen Lees was a famous populist orator, a fiery orator. And back in the 1870s and 1880s, when women could not even vote, Mary Helen Lees was on the political stump opposing the monopoly power that was squeezing farmers off the land back then. And she said to the corn farmers throughout the plain states, it's time to raise less corn and more hell. I think that's our job too. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you.